And why is that so? And that's why the brand value of Indian education system that is now becoming even more acceptable outside. So it's firstly very important to look and understand inward as to why do we really feel as educationists. And if you don't, I would like to leave the stage convincing you that we should, being the intellectual capital of the world. Let's look at the regulatory aspects first. When my parents first set up the school in 1978, society ran the enterprise. Educational in nature, charitable in nature, and that's how, and teaching being a calling was how education is defined. However, what has happened now is the regulatory environment and the commercial needs of running an enterprise like an education setup has redefined that notion. So if you look at what promotes systems in India, let's look at the financial regulatory aspects. In the Reserve Bank of India, you essentially have two segments of financing, preferred and selective. Education for decades was in the selective zone of funding, financing, or whichever you want to look at it. So the first aspect that goes towards the promotion of this industry, if I might say so, is it shifts from the very apex bank of India, it shifts from being preferred and not just selective. We then go on a few years ago to allow a direct investment to the extent of 100% coming into education. We then further move on to say that for the first time, while educational institutions have been existing in India, the income tax clause says under 1023C that if you are a charitable educational setup, you can be completely exempt from income tax. So financially, these three things really promote the existence and influence, understanding the impact of education in society today. We then go on to the essential resource that defines education, the teaching resource. Not just within India, but even at GEMS in Dubai, we get to take 1,200 to 1,400 teachers, recruit them every year from here and take them to schools across GEMS. But India is very quickly becoming a leading provider to various countries, not just for Indian schools, but for various schools across, teaching resources from India. So we inherently have an extremely good knowledge pool of teachers and head teachers and academic coordinators and subject coordinators and affiliation masters and so on and so forth. A platform like this itself suggests the resource and the knowledge pool that we have within ourselves. The fourth goes is to the curriculum. The acceptance of a curriculum as we stand today, be it a state board or the ICSU CBSE, is not one that has been held with reverence and strength in these last 2 years. The very assessment of many students doing the O's in A levels compared to the ICSE and CBSE, graduating foreign degrees, if that is any assessment of the qualification of a student life in a school in India, defines that we have a robust school education system. Does need to change, yes. But inherently, is it a robust system? The answer to that is yes. So financially, the regulatory aspect promotes this. Teaching resource is a knowledge reservoir that we have within ourselves. The schooling education system is robust and has been robust and stands robust today, with lots of rooms to change and become even more robust. And therefore, if we look at the social fabric now in India, which because of its diversity is the most easy for an international student to come into India and be accepted, not in just HE education, higher education, but also in school education, it clearly shows to you that India having English as a second language makes it extremely acceptable to the international community. So So therefore, if you look at very large educational concepts, and I have been involved in doing two such large educational concepts, one for the Prime Minister of Malta and the other for the Prime Minister of Macedonia. If you look at these large educational hectares and acreages in education cities, you would find that most of these movements that have happened in Suzhou, Beijing, Shanghai have not been able to get the global student footprint to come to their campuses, or be it the Harrows and the Dulwich schools that have come across in Bangkok and Singapore. The reason is the social fabric. The reason is the social makeup, the traditions, the culture, the language, the food. These barriers do not exist within India. We stand diverse. And therefore, this again promotes a very strong reason that indeed India can, with all of these aspects, and the new promoted, strong brand India position that we stand globally in, puts us in a position that we can easily say empowers the position of India as the intellectual capital of the world. I had the privilege to be in Dubai for the last 2 days, where we had the Honorable Prime Minister visiting. He spoke about the international online education, and the people there addressed the strength of being in India, either for education, or to impart education, or to invest in education. This inward interest, this reverse immigration of defining education doesn't mean stepping out of India. This reverse immigration of investment, teachers and students into India is because it's not just me, it's not just you, it's not this forum, but people at large understand the importance of education in India and the way it is being paved to be the intellectual capital. Coming towards the Indian education going overseas, the only difference is there is no debate in the fact that are there large number of schools of Indian curriculum overseas? Yes, there is. But the difference is the address to the Indian population there. They do not have the acceptance of the IB curriculum that you want to offer in your schools in India, because there is a global acceptance on the program. An IB program is not offered in India for a particular community because they have an affinity to that program. It's a globally robust, acceptable program, and therefore you opt for it. So the only difference, coming back to the second part of this keynote, is yes, there are schools of Indian origin outside. They're either ICSE or CBSE. Southeast Asia has much more of them than the countries beyond that. But we are seeing schools coming up in Mauritius. We are seeing schools coming up even in Eastern Europe that are of ICSE or CBSE affiliated. But primarily, those schools are being put there because of the percentage of Indian population, or rather, the composition of the student population in those countries which are on the higher side towards Indian origin. And that's why you have those schools and the growth of those schools there. But we stand, having said the first part of us addressing us as intellectual capital, we need to review our assessment and evaluation system. We can't have two national boards with two different approaches towards an assessment and evaluation. We can't have grading and marks both together. We need to have a universal system. A system which is acceptable not just for the Indian community or the Indian student, but for the student community at large. That qualifies him not just to sit in that examination in a CBSE school in Singapore and still be able to apply for a competitive exam in India, but that it gives him the cutting edge as the other international programs give. So our address here is we need to, as boards in India, as a policy of education, we need to bring those changes in our school education system that make it acceptable to the largest student population, and schools that go out of India are not just open to address the Indian population, but for the plethora of students that want to have an apex excellent schooling system. The idea here is related, and I would like to narrate a quick story to you. It was in Phoenix, Arizona in 1984 that a bear strolled in the middle of town. The bear strolling in created a lot of confusion. So the wildlife people were called, and they captured the bear, and they airlifted the bear towards a secluded area in town in a cage that could just accommodate him or a little bit more than him. But it was agreed by the mayor of Arizona that a natural habitat in 25 acres should be made in which the bear should be allowed to move about freely and give him the life that he so deserved. It took 2 years to make the habitat. And on the day that it was agreed that the bear should be released, the media was there, the mayor was there, and they were willing to create a story of how the bear was being given this natural life of freedom. At the right time, with the media clicks, the clap of the sound, the door was lifted of the cage by remote control, by the mayor, but the bear didn't budge. Minutes, hours, evening went on across to night. People were there with benches and carpets and sandwiches and picnic stuff, but the bear didn't go out. It was much later at night and early in the morning that a rattle of the cage woke everybody up. And they found that there was a movement in the cage. Lights were up, the mayor was called, the cameras were on, and they saw the bear move out. He moved out of the cage, looked left and right, walked straight out, walked towards his left a few steps, but then walked back to the cage. And as he walked back in the cage and stepped in the cage, he slumped. They waited for a few minutes, poked him, tried to wake him up before the vent went in and said that he had had a cardiac arrest and he had died. Friends, the point I want to make here is when they measured what he had walked the exact dimensions of the cage in which he was captive for 2 years. Are we as educationists here today willing to break the shackles of the education system that exist to make our extremely robust system, our armory of becoming the intellectual capital of the world, to address it at our school levels, at our district levels, at our policy levels, to make it a universally accepted program, not just for the Indian plethora, but for the world at large. Thank you so much for having me here. Thank you to Franchise India. God bless.
Thank you so much, sir. I request you to please stay back. Would like to thank you by presenting a memento. I request Ms. Pritima from Franchise India to please join us on stage. On behalf of Franchise India, thank you so much, sir, for joining us. It's a privilege to have you amongst us this afternoon, this evening. Thank you so very much. Ladies and gentlemen, please give it up for Mr. Amreesh Chandra. As technology has advanced and revolutionized the world we have studied in, we have powered the pragmatic transformation in education. Today, there is a new world and old world in education, and the two need to be married